Good afternoon. Welcome back to the channel. This video is not financial advice, not a financial advisor. Do your own research, make your own decisions. Okay, guys, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be comparing ICP to SUI and Walrus. But before I get started, I have a disclaimer. This will be a relative comparison with ICP and SUI plus Walrus, but it will more so be a conversation about systems design and software architecture and the implications because of design and architecture. Those are the main differences here. And so those are going to be the areas for comparison. But I could make a very similar case for most every other model in the entire industry. And so this is not a critique about SUI specifically. It's more so just a comparison of different types of architecture and the implications because of that. Now, I want to define dependencies really quick because I'm going to use that term throughout the rest of this video, and it's very relevant to this conversation. Dependencies, in the context of this video, third-party systems needed outside of the core network. The core network here will be SUI for full web-based applications and systems that the app itself, any given app that launched their token on SUI, other systems that that app depends on, hence the name dependencies. So, and I will also say the term depending on the use case a lot in this video. And I'm sorry, there's no way to get around it. I just have to add that in because it all really depends on the use case with a lot of the things that I'm going to be discussing in this video. So the reason why I don't do videos like this is because I don't classify ICP as a layer one, and I never have. I think it should be classified as a cloud service provider similar to Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services. And I think SUI should be classified more so as a database management system if we're going to be using traditional terminology from our legacy software stack. And that's not me saying that I think that because of this, that SUI doesn't matter or that this makes ICP better. I just think they're different types of software systems. I think they're complementary software systems the same way that Postgres is a complementary system to Google Cloud. Okay? Same concept. And database management systems are a critical, essential part of our software stack. Yeah. But if you were to look at core functionality, if you were to strip out all third-party systems and you were to just isolate the network itself, ICP and SUI, nothing else, and you were to look at the core functionality with the network itself in isolation, ICP as a standalone network, you can build and deploy full web applications on ICP without the need for third-party systems like oracles, cloud providers, or firewalls. SUI as a standalone network, especially without Walrus or anything else, you can't do much of anything without oracles, storage solutions, cybersecurity systems, and possibly database management systems, content delivery networks, depending on the use case. Now, let's add Walrus to the conversation. Let me just read over a few things really quick. I'm not going to get too in the weeds on this. Walrus focuses on providing a robust but affordable solution for storing unstructured content on decentralized storage nodes while ensuring high availability and reliability even in the presence of Byzantine faults. Now, so we compared ICP to SUI, looking at both of them as standalone networks without any other outside dependencies. So let's add Walrus to the conversation. Using only these two systems, do you have enough to build and deploy fully working web-based applications? And I would argue, no, you do not. You will still need numerous other dependencies like oracles, external database management systems, depending on the use case, potentially cloud providers, potentially content delivery networks, cybersecurity systems, firewalls, so on and so forth. Okay? And important point, different use cases may require certain types of and different types of systems and third-party dependencies. Fully functional social media, like what you see on X and or YouTube, that more complex type of use case and application would require probably more systems than something like a basic website that doesn't really have much traffic. All right. So that's an important concept too. Different types of use cases may require different outside dependencies, outside third-party systems. So OpenChat is the proof of concept I always like to use when I'm discussing ICP, especially with people who are not familiar with ICP. If you want to get a look and feel for fully on-chain applications that are running without firewalls, and OpenChat has been running without firewalls for years. This is a big deal, guys. There's a $10 trillion cybercrime problem. Cybercrime is becoming one of the biggest problems on Earth. And so the fact that software systems can run fully on-chain without firewalls is a huge deal, regardless of whether the industry acts like that or not. But OpenChat is a great proof of concept for anybody who wants to go use a fully on-chain application and just see the look and feel for everything. Now, important details before I go any further. This is the whole conversation about depending on the use case. It's still early, but ICP can already run web-based applications fully on-chain without firewalls and cybersecurity with no third-party dependencies. However, based on use case, there may be hybrid applications. When I say hybrid applications, I mean most of the application is fully on-chain, but they have other systems tied into it for other types of functionality for the users. That type, it still makes sense to use an outside provider just for user experience as opposed to trying to do it fully on chain because it's so early with the fully on chain model. It's only 4 years into a 20+ year roadmap. Look at use cases on ICP like this. Over time, more use cases will make sense for the fully on chain model. For example, today, certain use cases like caffeine, that makes sense today where it wouldn't have made sense probably 2.5 years ago. All right, so in 2 or 3 years from now, more use cases will make sense on the fully on-chain model just because it's so new and the network has to mature, more infrastructure has to be built out, more tooling, more functionality, more upgrades, so on and so forth. All right, so based on the use case, there may be hybrid applications because ICP is a new type of software stack, and more complex use cases will make more sense later out on the timeline. That's very important for the rest of the conversation because I would not look at anything like it's all or nothing, right? Because any given application that's using SUI and Walrus today, they, depending on the use case, it might make sense to use a model like this. It might make sense to use more traditional tech services, products, and companies. However, a very important point, when looking at software stacks, it does not need to be an all or nothing situation right now because of how early it is with ICP. For some use cases, using a hybrid model right now may make the most sense. Using something like this, these are just examples of different providers that you may or may not see with any given project application using SUI and Walrus. For some use cases, using a hybrid model may make more sense based on the use case right now. However, so if you just look at a model like this compared to a model like this, where it's just SUI and ICP, I'll give you a great example. Okay. So for you, anybody in the SUI ecosystem, think about building your own website that you own and control, that's fully on chain, right? And or just your own project, your own SUI-based project, but you use ICP as the cloud provider. It deploys your application deploys to ICP. You own and control it. An AI model can build it all out for you and customize it to your needs specifically. The token itself and everything still settles back to SUI, but you're using ICP as that other dependency, as opposed to using 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different dependencies. And you actually own the application and you don't have to worry about all the problems that come along with traditional tech stacks and cybercrime. You don't have to worry about firewalls. You don't have to worry about potentially needing an external database management system. And we're going to get into more of that as we go throughout the rest of the video. So, for example, your own personal website, that might make more sense using a SUI ICP stack. However, there might be other use cases where it doesn't make sense to use this type of software stack today. All right. SUI plus Walrus plus other third parties like this may make more sense for certain use cases right now. SUI plus ICP and caffeine may make a lot more sense for other use cases like your own personal website or your own on-chain Patreon. Backing up, an issue, and again, depending on the project that's on SUI, there's a bunch of different projects that use SUI and Walrus. And depending on which one we're talking about, I'm speaking more broadly and kind of zooming out and looking at this more in an abstract way. But you're going to have numerous dependencies, more dependencies than this. This is the least amount, just two different systems, SUI and ICP, together forming an end-to-end fully on-chain model right, that delivers on the promises of Web3, read, write, own, that's the least amount of dependencies that you're going to get outside of just using ICP solely by itself, right? But when you're using this model, you might be using 6, 7, 8, 9 different types of systems all tied into one application, all interacting via API calls just to deliver the user experience. Now, for us, we don't see all these other systems when we're using the application. It's out of sight, out of mind. But behind the user interface, there's numerous different systems interacting with each other to bring us the user experience. But some of the issues with this model is you have numerous dependencies. The more dependencies, the more the attack surface increases, and the more the complexity for the developers, and especially the more the complexity for artificial intelligence. You need firewalls, and you have to deal with the security problem that is one of the biggest cybercrime is one of the biggest problems on earth right now. And you don't own the application. And so here's all the issues with this model. And maybe as Walrus matures over time, some of these things get worked out. Maybe, I'm not sure. I'm just generally saying these are going to be some of the issues with this model compared to this model. Because with the SUI ICP stack, you can launch the token or smart contract on SUI. Then you can have Caffeine build your own custom application that's on ICP. You own it. You don't need firewalls and cybersecurity, and it's the least amount of dependencies possible. You just have two different systems. Now, in the use case where this would probably make more sense is your own personal website and or like your own Patreon. Now, it's very early for Caffeine. I want to say that like out in the open, but it's pretty impressive with what it can build today. And if you just think about what Caffeine's going to be able to build in 6 months, in 12 months, in 2 years from now, it's going to be able to build crazy complex, sophisticated applications for users that they own and control that are fully on chain. And if they want to use a different network, SUI, Ethereum, Bitcoin, whatever it is, they can do that very easily and just settle back to that network and use ICP just as the application layer. They're going to be using some other type of system for an application layer. So might as well use the one that gives you the most security, that gives you real ownership, that gives you the least amount of dependencies possible. Now, important point is, let's just say, speaking hypothetically, there's 50 different applications using SUI and Walrus today. Well, out of those 50 different applications, they're likely in different categories based on use case. Some might be social apps. Some might just be tools. Some might be things like games or DeFi, right? And so those are all different categories of use cases. Important. All right, stick with me. Those 50 different apps that are using SUI and Walrus may have, because again, SUI and Walrus alone by themselves would not be enough for full working web applications. You need additional dependencies on top of that. So those 50 different applications may have different database management systems if they're needed, may have different cybersecurity setups, firewall configurations, may have different cloud providers, access and permission systems, so on and so forth. And so that starts creating complexity software system to software system, even if at their core, they are all using SUI and Walrus. If some of their other dependencies have a lot of little nuanced differences in complexity system to system, now you're introducing friction with two different software systems trying to interact with each other versus a model where you have universal interoperability and everything is in a canister, everything speaks the same language, and all the friction system to system is removed. Now, for anybody who thinks that this isn't a problem, you have to zoom out and look at the web from a 30,000 foot view, and you have to generally understand integration system to system and why there's a middleware industry. What I'm discussing, the differences between two different software systems, they could be written in different programming languages. They could have different database management systems. Again, firewall configurations. There's so many ways software systems could be different access and permission systems, right? But this is the reason why there is a middleware industry. Think about A is a software application that's using SUI and Walrus. B is a software application that's using SUI and Walrus. C, so on and so forth. Okay, so these are 4 different, and just zoom out, extrapolate, imagine this is 400 different applications. And The reason why they have different colors and different letters is that represents the potential differences software system to software system. Why does that matter? Well, let's go back to the example of you're creating your own website, your own little, let's call it a mini social media application. And for anybody who's like in the SUI ecosystem, just hear me out on this. You're creating your own mini social media application and you want to have as much functionality as possible and you want to have as much connectivity with your friends and other people in your network, right? Because they're probably going to create their own little mini social app, their own website, whatever it is. Okay. Now, getting back to the conversation about friction and complexity system to system, even if you're using SUI and Walrus, you might have other dependencies tied into that outside of SUI and Walrus. You'll definitely have some dependencies, all right? It's just a matter of what other system we're talking about whether or not they're different and how much friction and complexity exists. But if you want to connect your website to like a friend of yours website or your mini social applications, if there's a lot of complexity and friction system to system, that's going to introduce more problems when you're trying to have connectivity with your application and somebody else's application. And if you think about that on a small scale, you say, oh, that's not really that big of a problem. It introduces manual intervention. So when we're talking about autonomously running applications, AI just running the web, all of this friction and complexity introduces manual intervention. Because when AI has to be able to be prepared to manage six or seven or eight different systems all tied into one application, that introduces a lot of complexity. It's just the same exact reason why it's hard to build software systems today. It's because there's so many different types of software systems. It's because there's so much complexity. AI experiences the exact same problem, but if you eliminate all of this complexity and you have everything built into one system, and AI only really has to be proficient on one system as opposed to 100 different systems, it makes the learning curve that much easier for AI, and it makes it that much more possible for AI to be able to run autonomous applications. So just back to this issue right here. Different. A is your own website or your own like Patreon mini social app using SUI and Walrus. B is somebody else in your network. Every single difference between your systems, if y'all have different database management systems, if y'all have different firewall configurations, all of this creates friction and complexity system to system. And so it is the difference between universal interoperability, which is what exists on ICP, and the same friction and complexity across systems, the same problem that exists right now. This is the reason why we have a huge middleware industry. Okay? Now, universal interoperability, going a little bit deeper into this, you have to zoom out and look down at the web as like, you have to zoom out from a 30,000-foot view to really see it. But the issue that I'm talking about, this is the reason the middleware industry is so big. However, if everything is in a canister, you don't need all these different middleware solutions. So think future social apps. Think about the interconnectedness between applications and how flexible or how rigid applications are. Think about the ease of use. If you have to call a software engineer to build out some complex integration between your application and one of your friends' application, and that has to be done as a manual process because you can't just program your canister and program your AI, hey, share this data with this account, right? You have to call in a software engineer to build out some type of complex integration, extrapolate out, zoom out at 30,000-foot view, and say, okay, the ease of use, the flexibility, and the connectability with this model is a million times better than the old Web 2 model because there's too much complexity with the Web 2 model, and AI has to deal with all that complexity too, just the same way software developers and software engineers have to deal with that complexity now. Is manual intervention needed? There's going to be a lot more scenarios where manual intervention will be needed on this other type of software stack because of all the complexity. Are additional systems needed? Yes, with the old model, that when I say additional systems, the entire middleware industry. All right. And so think when we're talking about use cases and why this matters. And what we're really talking about is just the flow of data, software system to software system, and how two different software systems communicate with each other. Think about metaverse in the future, metaverse. Think about hyper local social media. Think about user driven online economies. And all of this is running autonomously with artificial intelligence. You can have your own AI model in your canister that you own and control that serves as the AI model that runs your application autonomously. And you just program your AI. And there's no outside third party that can do anything to steal data from you, to prompt your AI with something else, to give your AI some unauthorized upgrade. Nothing. You own it all. It's on chain. It's fully transparent. It's secure. And so, how software systems communicate with each other and whether or not there is complexity and friction involved is a very, very important topic, especially with artificial intelligence and needing autonomous systems. And again, a good example here would just be creating your own website, your own Patreon, and having your artificial intelligence manage your website, your Patreon, your mini social application. You want the most simplified software stack imaginable. You don't want tons of different systems tied into that because that's the more systems, the more likely something's going to go wrong. So, very important question to ask. And nobody goes over this in the entire industry. And like this will cut down your learning curve and get you to the correct answer a million times faster if you lead with this type of thought process. For starting out, you're going to look at some new layer one or some new stack that's in the space that's claiming to be the biggest thing out there. This is the question to start with. On average, what other systems will be needed for a full web-based application? That question and the answer to that question will cut through the confusion. Again, all this depends on use case. The more simplistic use cases will likely require less third-party dependencies. The more complex use cases will require more third-party dependencies. And so different apps may require additional dependencies. Important details. Crypto projects do not openly broadcast the dependencies and the third parties that they use. Or they don't broadcast the fact that they need numerous third parties for full working web applications. This is normally not a part of the documents that most projects put out. They may list one or two, but that's it. They almost never give a full breakdown of the parts of their application that are on chain and the ones that are off chain. They never give like a full breakdown of all the different providers involved in that one application. This is how all software works outside of ICP. Numerous systems all communicating via API calls. This is the status quo. And so, talking about ICP, this is a new concept. It's a new type of software stack, it's a new type of software. And it's a paradigm shift in the world of software because we've been using this overly complex model for years and years and years. And it's why software and building software solutions is so difficult. It's one of the many reasons why. Relative comparisons, again, backing up really quick. So relative comparisons involve many different variables. You see how I'm not just pulling up transaction speed and just say, oh, this has better transaction speed. If you want to do deep dive relative comparisons, so many different variables come into play. And I will say, I can go a lot deeper on this conversation. I'm trying to keep this within 30 to 40 minutes and easy to understand for the average person. But I am prepared to do follow-up videos after this, depending on different things that are being said. Okay. Yeah. But relative comparisons involve many variables. And the more dependencies and the more API endpoints, the larger the attack surface. If SUI was a comparable system to ICP, it would not need Walrus and other systems to build fully working web applications. However, the SUI ICP stack itself would probably make sense for a lot of different use cases, even right now, even with how early it is. But in 6 to 12 months, especially in 18 months, this stack is going to make a lot more sense for different use cases, in my opinion, than this stack. Main differences on ICP. You own the application. You don't need firewalls and cybersecurity. Again, there is a $10 trillion cybercrime problem. The least amount of dependencies possible. The network, and you're on a network that has universal interoperability. And if you think about why that matters, just think about how easy it would be to connect with other social groups, with other friends, with other applications. It's everything's in a canister, and you can just prompt your AI, hey, share my data with this different application, with this different user. If it's on the old model, you might have to call a software engineer and have some type of integration built out and managed and kept up over time. And that'll just introduce new security risks. So you're on a network that has universal interoperability, so it will be easy to connect with other social groups and friends. And it's optimized specifically for autonomous applications ran by artificial intelligence that the users themselves own. And so I think this would be a great model for the future. I'm not saying it has to be all or nothing. There might be certain use cases where it makes more sense for this type of a software stack today. Entirely possible. Okay. However, I think that over time, this model is going to make a lot more sense for more and more use cases. And especially with Caffeine doing most of the building process. And it deploys on a network where you don't need firewalls, where you own it. It's fully transparent. It's auditable. It's all done. The end. That's all I have for this video. And I try to keep this high level and easy to understand for the average person, especially for the average person who's never looked into either one of these networks. I could go much, much more in depth on this entire conversation. And I may or may not do that, depending on everything after this. But I can go a lot deeper. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If I got anything wrong, let me know, but I don't really, I think everything was pretty standard and straightforward. Yeah, that's it. Take care. This was not financial advice. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.